This video is on initial design ideas, so finally getting to the, I suppose, the fun part of the project, where, well, the bit I enjoy really, where we're starting to come up with ideas and being creative and innovative with our work. Now this video is purely really about what perhaps we need to do in terms of meeting the exam criteria, and it is purely a suggestion as to what sort of things you might want to include on your pages. However, if we discuss the new specifications for GCSE and indeed at AS and A level, we have to think about the focus of iterative design. Okay, so if you're unaware what iterative design is, effectively it's a constant sort of process where you are always prototyping, testing, analysing and refining or modifying your project as it goes along, to show that sort of story, I suppose, or that development as it goes. So as we know, design is a cyclic activity which is constantly undergoing change, so at no point really is design ever finished. Okay, if it was, I suppose we'd all be out of a job. So it's constantly undergoing. Now with the pages I'm showing here, all I'm discussing is perhaps the sort of things you want to include just to make sure that you're kind of meeting all the assessment criteria, and I'm going to have a series of videos coming up shortly about ways that you might want to approach the actual design process. So this is more about the sort of things that you want to make sure that you've got on the pages, I guess, to make sure your initial criteria pages are good and you're meeting some of the assessment criteria as dictated by the exam board. So first of all, if we look at this page, we have to make sure ideally that we've got a wide range of unique ideas. Okay, so this person is obviously working with jewellery products, and it's the first page. I mean, you could have several pages like this, but we want to make sure that our designs are unique. We want to make sure that they're different and innovative from each other, and obviously they should come from our design specification, which obviously is fed by our research. So when we're coming up with unique ideas, we can use other ideas for inspiration. We can come up with the mood board to hit particular inspiration in that sense, or we can work with our consumer and stuff, and this hopefully will ensure that we're not creating ideas that are too obvious or that have already been done before. Okay, so it's all going to be fed from our research. As you can see, we've got one piece of inspiration, I suppose, over here, and you can see how this design might have formed a sort of starting point, but then the student has kind of worked from that, and there's lots of other sort of references to various different things from his mood board or from his research there that have appeared to influence the designs. Okay, so there we're linking in the research to show how the designs are inspired, and this could be links to lots and lots of research. And again, referring back to what we were talking about with iterative design, as the research happens, so you know, at the point of where it becomes important, we can include it in to our slideshows at that point. Okay, so if we're coming up with a design idea and suddenly we hit a problem, we might do some research into anthropometrics or looking at a particular form of nature to inspire us to come up with a slightly different design, and then we can include it in at that point to show how it's changed. So again, we're kind of constantly sort of analysing and testing and refining our designs as we go in that sense. Okay, now in addition to this, in terms of the annotation, we want to make sure that, you know, the basics are right. We're checking our sort of punctuation, our spelling, our grammar, that there's no sort of issues in there. But in terms of the sort of things that we can include in our annotation, okay, I'd say the most important thing, I guess, is function. Okay, so we actually say what the things are doing and what the product actually is. Okay, it's often missed off or assumed by students. Okay, so you just assume that people know exactly what you're doing, and that's, you know, apparent. Okay, but sometimes it's not. Okay, so it's very important, in my opinion, to just explain what the design idea is, perhaps how it's inspired, if there's particular different parts on it and stuff like this. So that's the functional part of it. Okay, now the other things that I see are kind of important are materials, manufacture and measurements. Okay, so I like to remember this by the little acronym MMMF. Okay, so it's materials, manufacture, measurements, and as I discussed already, function. I think it's very, very important. Okay, now the other three, materials, measurements and manufacturing details, in my opinion, these are just ways that you can start thinking about feasibility when you come to develop your idea further. Okay, so if we don't know what material the product's made out of, it's not feasible. If we don't know the size of it, it's not going to be feasible, and if we don't know how we're going to produce it, again, it's not feasible. Now, we probably don't want to think about this too deeply at the start, because we don't want to stall the flow of creativity or make it so that we can't be creative or innovative, okay, but it's always worth thinking about functionality, because if we don't, we're basically not going to produce products that are going to work or that are in the realm of reality in any way, okay. So it's always important to sort of think about the function in some sense as well, and by that we need to think about feasible ideas, sort of thinking about some of these ideas, okay. So they're kind of crucial things I would include in terms of my annotation and how I'm developing ideas. But effectively, this is it. Point number 5, this is all about iterative design, okay? So what we're constantly doing is evaluating and developing our ideas, okay, as we go across. And it might be a little bit of an old way of saying this in terms of specifications, but talking about design decisions, okay? So in my opinion, a design decision, it happens all the time, okay. The difficult bit is accepting when it happens that you have to actually record it in some way, okay. And this is the real hard bit, especially with students, okay, because you're designing, everything is happening in your mind, okay. Now the moderator or the examiner is not going to see inside your mind, but he is going to see onto your design pages and in your portfolio, okay. So you have to basically describe and dictate everything that's going on, and every little change, every little alternative or modification that you make should be recorded as you go, okay. Now, as a suggestion to further develop the pages, we can also kind of start thinking about sort of more formal techniques of displaying the idea for sort of slightly better presentation, and including CAD and perhaps even modelling. I'll talk about this later, modelling to help develop design ideas, okay. So it's always best, if you can, to try and include formal techniques, because again, it's just going to make your communication that much better. So if we're using oblique, isometric, or perspective techniques, or maybe even free line weight perspective to help present our ideas, okay. But if you can't do this, I mean, ultimately it's all in the annotation, okay. There are some very famous designers who are not particularly rated for the quality of drawing, but it's all about the communication, and they can communicate themselves. The only way you can communicate yourself is through annotation in your portfolio, okay. So I can't address this enough. You are constantly talking about your design decisions and constantly evaluating and annotating everything you do as you go through, to make sure that these pages are particularly comprehensive and are going to be very good.